We are starting chapter 5, and in chapter 4, we discussed the three garments of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action, and how the thought, speech, and action, in a certain sense, are more powerful than the actual intellect and emotion which they house, because the way to learn Torah and do mitzvahs is through the thought, speech, and action. So even though thought, speech, and action are just limited to thought, speech, and action, but in a sense they have a much greater power. Because the Eibush is unlimited, and Torah mitzvahs are Hashem, and therefore when I perform the mitzvah, it binds me to Hashem. Now what we're going to do is go much deeper. Because when the soul gets bound to Hashem, there is a special unity and bond that takes place in the soul when you, in a sense, become absorbed, almost like Hashem beams you up into Him. And you and the Eibush become one. And that takes place through Torah. When we learn Torah, we're not learning about God, but rather we are uniting with Him. We're becoming one with Him. Perakei. Ultesefes bir bayer heitev, to explain well. Loshen tfisa shamer Elio. There is a chapter in the Zohar, which many people say on Friday afternoon. Some people say it every day actually. And Elio says, it says, Pasach Elio. Elio opened up and he said, Riboy Neilomim, leis machshava tfisa vach klal. No thought can be teifus you. No thought can grasp you. And that's interesting when you say leis machshava tfisa vach, because the word grasp is an interesting word to use for intellect. I know in English we use the word grasp also, but I grasp a physical object. You don't grasp an intellect. The correct term would be I understand, I comprehend. But to say that I grasp, you don't grasp. Why would you grasp it? So what he's going to explain is that this is an analogy because in a sense you're literally grasping. Every intellect works in a way of grasping. When you understand and comprehend in your intellect an idea, so what's really going on is the intellect grasps the concept, it encompasses him in his intellect. And what happens is the muskal and the concept. So I'm grasping the concept, and the concept is grasped in me. It's grasped inside the seichel, which was able to understand him. And look at it in an analogy, right? Look at this like this human being with his brain, and he's going out and he's trying to capture this idea, almost like hunting. When you go hunting, you're trying to get an animal, you're trying to grasp him, trying to get him. So you're trying to take an idea and you want to understand it. And what happens is you hit a brick wall. You're trying to learn a chapter in Tanya now. So what are you doing? You're listening, understanding. Got that. Okay, I didn't understand that. And then I don't know what you're talking about. Right? That's like me. That's my intellect. That's the idea. And I'm banging against the wall. I'm just trying to find a way to get in, to penetrate. And then suddenly, one idea sinks. You ever heard that expression? It's a feeling which suddenly you look around and you're like, whoa, I get it. I get it means, whew, that's internalized. When you internalize something, what happens is there's an experience of transformation. Like, wow, that was incredible. So I heard this idea, how did someone speak? And then there's like this moment of integration and connection when you got it. Now pay attention to how the words here are expressed. He says, "Harei haseichel tofes et hamuskal umakifo besichlo." That's present tense. The intellect is currently grasping the idea, encompassing him in his intellect. And then he says, right, so that's currently me. I'm trying to understand the idea. Who's in control? Idea or me?
Idea.
The idea is in control. Because he is on the paper, or he is in the other person's brain who's explaining it to me.
He knows who he is.
And he knows what he is. And I don't understand it. And I'm trying to rack my brain and break my head to get in. Right? And what happens? The muskal, and the idea is nitpas, is grabbed, umukafu melubash, and encompassed and enclosed, b'seicha seichel, in the intellect, shehisigoi b'iskiloi. You see past tense? So what happens is the idea is grabbed, grasped, encompassed, and enclosed inside the intellect. Because what happens is, there's part one of me trying to break through, and then there's the breakthrough moment. And when I broke through, what happens is the intellect is now absorbed into me, and he's encompassed by me. So think about it like the idea is here, and I'm here, I'm breaking in, he's encompassing me. I'm like fumbling around trying to get in. What happens is over time, he switches, and I become this power, and he is absorbed into me. That's why when you're busy learning, if you're learning for real, you're completely engrossed in the subject matter. You can't think about anything else. Over time, if you internalize the idea, it becomes a part of you. And now, it's like, yeah, of course. It's part of who I am. In fact, it could be so much integrated into who I am that I don't even understand someone else. How come you don't get it? You ever had that?
Yes.
Like you're talking to someone else and you're like, oh, like, what do you mean? What's the question? That's because the idea was integrated into you. You and the idea experienced a fusion. I think it's called, the best way to call it is meiosis. What that means is that it's almost like, think about an egg being fertilized. So it's like the sperm and the egg trying to get in, right? And the sperm's trying to find his way into the egg. Where am I going? And then after a while, he penetrates. And when he penetrates, the egg just accepts him. And there's this whole embryo created out of it. And they become a new entity. And that new entity is when the seichel, the intellect, is absorbed into you. And what happens is also the gamma seichel melubash bamusko. So, in addition to the seichel of the person uniting with the idea, the unity is far greater. Because at the time of learning, when you're actually learning, your seichel is completely engrossed. Melubash bamuskel b'shosha masiga b'seif se b'sichle. You are totally engrossed and enmeshed inside this. So, you and the idea are becoming one, but you're so engrossed in it that you have to concentrate, you have to focus, and you have to let go completely of any other understanding. And when seichel actually drops in, we discussed that in chapter 3, when you let go and the penny drops, when you stop trying. You try, you lost it, and then you lose it, and suddenly it happens. And you get inside. So, while you're learning something, there's this incredible idea of being engrossed and involved in it, and then afterwards it becomes a part of who you are. So what we're seeing is something totally wondrous that doesn't actually exist, as he's going to say, in the physical realm. You cannot unite with anyone or anything. You have no way to unite. When two people get married, they think they're one entity, they call themselves one entity.
You just gave an analogy of something that unites and becomes a different entity.
Exactly.
But it doesn't become you.
Correct. I'm just saying most of the time, in most of the examples that we have, when two people marry, they're not married. They're just two people together. We want to talk about two halves of one neshama and alle gute Sachen. Everything's very nice. Bottom line is, it's two different people. You don't have that sense of absolute oneness. Well, in any experience that we have in this world, we remain separate. And separation is very hard for us earthlings. What we want is unity and oneness. And where do you get oneness? The only place where you get oneness is in intellect. I want to become one with Hashem. So Hashem, come. Let's unite. Let's become one. I have no idea what that means. In fact, when I do a mitzvah, we'll see that later on what happens, but when I do a mitzvah, I don't become one with Hashem. Because if I shake a lulav, so there's me and the lulav, and I shook him. I put on the tefillin. I didn't become the tefillin. It's something which I did, which was on me, and yeah. It doesn't become, most mitzvahs, not all. But when you learn Torah, there's something unique which transpires. It doesn't happen any other time, and that is when you learn Torah, you and the Torah, which is an intellect, fuse. Because all intellect is that way. Any intellect becomes one with you.
I ask you, is that why that, like, when I learn with a friend, I feel the closest to a friend because we're common.
You're learning one thing together. That's a byproduct of that. But what we're talking about is... But hold on, we're talking about an absolute unity. There's a lot of... That's great. Very powerful. So let's focus on the unity that's happening over here. What he's going to say is that intellect, we said, intellect and you become one. So I'm trying to get the idea into me. I'm racking my brain to trying to get the intellect into me. Then I get the intellect into me, and the intellect become one. Because when you learn something, you know how sometimes you literally become what you learned. You are what you eat, you are what you learn. Your intellect, your ideas, and you fuse and become absolute one. Right? Derech Mashal, let's take the analogy over here. So now, it happens with any intellect. But let's talk about Torah. When you learn a halacha in Mishnah or Gemara, la shura al buria. That's the key. You have to really learn the Gemara and understand it fully. Because if you are just superficially understanding it, as many of us do much of the time, so it doesn't penetrate you. And it'll penetrate you on a very superficial level because you're being superficial. But if you really choose to understand and to work and to rack your brain, and Judaism is designed, this is the whole system of Gemara. It's designed for you to have to rack your brain. You ever wondered why Gemara works that way? Tell me the point. You know, elsewhere he talks about Torah from the Mashal in Sefer Daniel. Daniel says, Levushe kitzlag chiver. Hashem's garment is like white snow. Snow is actually water. Except that the water above gets packaged into a snowflake. That snowflake descends into this world as a snowflake. And then somewhere in this world, you're able to unravel, unpack what he has, and then the snowflake becomes water. And so it is that Hashem's garment is like snow. Hashem takes his self, his own being. He packages it in a way that he can get it down to you. So how does a nivra, a creation like me and you, have access to the divine? You don't. You're infinitely distant from the divine. But the divine, the Eibishter took himself, embedded it in Torah, which is the first word of Aseret HaDibros. Onoichi Hashem Elokecha. Onoichi is an acronym. Onoichi is I, but it's an acronym for Ano, I. Nafshi, my soul. Ksavis, I wrote down. Yehovis, I gave to you. Onoichi, Ano, I. Nafshi, my soul. Ksavis, I wrote down. Yehovis, I gave it to you. I'm taking myself and giving it over to you. You want me? Here I am in Torah. Torah and Eibishter are absolutely, utterly, and totally one. What do you want to do with it? You want to receive the Torah. So you want to grab the intellect and unpack it. Because there's godliness in the Torah. And then the Torah is given down to you. What's unreal about it is that it's given to you in a way that you can actually learn. Because you know how to learn it. Just learn the Torah. Learn Tanya, learn Gemara. Learn whatever you're learning, and you're learning godliness. Now, what happens is, your goal is to actually unpack. You'll discover something wondrous about learning Torah. If you learn a Gemara, for example, and you learn it again and 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 again, what do you think is going to happen? If you learn it 60 times,
Understand it differently.
you'll understand it differently. At some point, you see how it'll stop being an intellectual idea. When you get something and you know it so well, at some point, it ceases to be the intellect. It becomes like something elevated, like David HaMelech says, Zmira Yisrael lichukecha. He says, your Torah is like a song to me. You ever seen a song which gets into like a frenzy? When the Chassidish niggun now, you sing it again and again and again and again and again. At some point, it's just soul. It really is very powerful. The soul is expressed. So, inside the halacha of Mishnah Gemara, when you understand it, so my intellect is grabbing that halacha. Remember the two parts? I'm grabbing it, I'm trying to understand it. When I do, I'm engrossed in it, and then it becomes part of me. Now, what is this halacha? If I'm studying science, then it's very simple. You and the science are becoming one. Which in chapter 8 he'll say is the danger of secular studies. It is. It's because you and the intellect become one. When you're learning that, that's why it's not called al-tahara sakoidesh. The purity is when you're getting from a pure source. So when you learn Torah, you're getting divine energy embedded in you. Why? Because the
So
hinel.
is it a real thing that when you learn someone else's, like a secular book, then that person's seichel is coming to you?
Kapasha, well, that's exactly what happens. When you learn something, that person's intellect becomes a part of
So
who you
if
are.
they're apikars, then you're going to get part of their apikarsis?
100%. Of course. You are what you learn.
Check
That's why.
So how does everyone
One
get
second.
someone
Nobody's saying they don't have chachma. The Greek philosophy was incredible chachma. The question is, at what point are you ready to it's chachma is it's real chachma. Are you ready to internalize it? Are
It's
you?
easier to read a book in English than to learn Tanya.
Tanya's in English also.
I don't understand it.
That's why we're learning it.
That's why I'm learning it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, let's say, for example, I'm
The
reading.
Rambam says, we'll get to that in chapter 8. The Rambam says certain times and you're allowed to learn secular studies, right? Like when it's helping you in certain things and you're allowed to take it, but you have to, at its core, understand, secular studies, he says it's actually better to talk to foreign B'Teilim than to learn secular. Because if you're talking nonsense,
doing it for a purpose?
Nonsense.
No.
No, shtissim, and you know shtissim, it's not becoming
to talk nonsense is better because it doesn't become part of you. It's bad, but it doesn't become part of you. To talk intellect, because it's real, this is anti what most Jews think, is worse. Because you're allowing the other intellect to penetrate
It's
you.
not anti what most Jews think. What if it's a different concept, like psychology, right? So
The foundation, again, chapter 8, not here, but the foundation of all secular study is to increase the yesh, to increase the sense of self. That's the goal, including all psychology. The goal of Torah is to increase your bond with godliness. Big difference. The foundation of Torah is that.
you're not learning it to increase your goal of godliness. I'm talking about secular
So
studies.
I'm thinking sometimes, yes, you might want to read the psychology to understand in order to use it. Like the Rambam says, like rakochis, the tabochis, the oifos. He says, I use the secular studies as the cooks and the bakers in my kitchen to be able to allow me to do what I do better. So under certain circumstances, you'll learn it. That's something else. Yes. But I'm saying, what is it? It is, in and of its own, the intellect of that person being absorbed by me. So when I'm learning Torah, what happens? It is the wisdom and the desire of Hashem. What does Hashem want? Read the Gemara. What he wanted is Reuven says XYZ. Shimon says ABC. Hashem says, if Reuben says A and Shimon says B, that's the verdict. Now, what are you learning there? you're learning about the will of Hashem. So let me ask you a question. Let's say the Torah that you're learning, this idea that you're learning, is a completely theoretical idea. Does it make sense to you to sit and study a shir in Hilchas Shabbos? Does it make sense to go to learn how to keep Shabbos?
Yes,
Very
it's
much.
like also. Yeah.
Hilchas brachas,
Also,
how to make brachas, beautiful, right? Why? Practical, simple. Give me something I got to do. How about, does it make sense to you to go learn? Let's keep it simple. Would you like to learn the halachas of shchenim, of neighbors? How to do with neighbors or whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, okay.
Could be helpful.
Would you like to learn the halachas of kodshim in the Beis Hamikdash? Karbanis, how to offer what carbon, this carbon, that carbon, how to
No,
offer
it's
and
nothing to
what
do
to
with
solve
it.
them.
no, but it's coming. It's a shame.
Yeah, but
coming. One day.
I'm still not having I'm not going to be.
So he's saying, 1 second. So what's more important to learn? Hilchas Shabbos, which happens every week? Or Hilchas kodshim, which...
I mean, the technical answer is they're both equal, but it feels better to learn something you can put into practicality.
Right. Now, when you...
Well, yeah, it's also more important right now because you have to do the mitzvahs.
But
You
I don't
can't do
think
the
one
mitzvahs if you
is-
don't
Right,
know.
but also, let's say I'm a scientist, right? So I'd love to know also psychology, but I'm trying to get the rocket space out the rocket out to outer space.
Right.
So I need to learn what I need to learn, and therefore I have to focus. If I don't focus, I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
So when your kid comes and tells you, and kids often do that, I don't know if you have the experience. Gemara is just ridiculous. Makes no sense. We're sitting over there.
I'm fighting every single day.
So the kid says, it makes no sense. I'm learning this Gemara. First of all, right. So you try to show him, it's not an ox and a cow. It's a car crashing into a bus. Oh, but it's just written in that kind of way. So the kid tells you, I don't care about cars crashing into buses either. Like, it's not irrelevant to me. And mind you, here's the bigger problem in Gemara. Okay, you know what? Fine, I'll learn it. So, could you please tell me what to do? So, right, if you read a textbook, right, it says, if this happens, then do that. If that happens, this is the background, this is the way. No, Gemara doesn't work that way. Gemara says, let's talk about the ox and the cow, right? But doesn't talk about the ox and the cow. What it says is that Abaye said the ox and the cow in this way. But why did he use that word in the conversation? He should use a different word. So Rabbi says, no, that's true, exactly. I use a different word, and therefore the whole different meaning to it. And then someone else comes along and says, you misunderstood it. That word was redundant anyway. Didn't happen. So, I got it. So why can't, first of all, what happened to the cow? Second of all, why couldn't you tell me that in the first place? Like, okay, so you got that now. So delete that whole part. Why do all children throughout the ages have to study that he said that, and then it was discovered to be not true? Now, how about this? We're going to learn the halachas of an ir hanidachas, or ben seir u'meireh. You know what that is?
Something never happened.
Yeah, that's the city that the majority of the city sinned, and ben seir u'meireh is between 3 months in a certain age, 12 years old, and you tell me, by the way, these halachas never happened. So, why are we learning them? Makes no sense. And here, this is a key point to understand because all our yeshiva systems are run on this basic idea that we're learning irrelevant information in an irrelevant way. So if you're a kid who likes Gemara and you like to argue and fight whenever, you'll say, sharpens your brain. You bet it sharpens your brain.
For 12 straight hours.
But every day, right, makes no sense. So the answer is over here, provided right here. You're not learning to know what to do. Let's get this straight. Two different things. You need to learn Hilchas Shabbos and Hilchas Brachas. You got to know what to do. It's very important to know what to do. That's called learning to know what to do. But we're not learning to know what to do right now. That's called a halacha session or whatever. We're talking now about integrating God into our beings. I want a meiosis with getlichkeit, with godliness. How do I get there? When I learn a halacha, right? So what happens is, me and God are one in this halacha. So think about it like this. This is the analogy, the snowflake. God takes himself, puts it into the snowflake, into intellect. And he says, I'm going to send it down to you. And your mission is to unpack and unravel and discover the inherent godliness that exists right inside there.
Why couldn't you just rain it on?
The reason he can't just rain it down is because he is infinitely removed from us. So the infinite Eibishter and finite me have no way of connecting, but God created this incredible thing called intellect. And intellect is a place where you and the intellect can become one. So if God is packaged in that intellect, so what happens is, through that intellect, you can discover Elokus. It's a long process. Now, even if this discussion we're having never happen and cannot happen, to come to actuality, nonetheless, this contains in it absolute godliness. You know, what it says is, HaTorah medaberes be'etzem boil yoinim ve'reimezes batachtainim. Torah is a piece of godliness that's communicated to us, and what you're seeing is everything but what you're seeing.
Are you reading inside? 'Cause I
Yeah.
can't find where we-
No, those words, no.
No, okay.
So, when you learn Torah and when you understand Torah and when you're internalizing Torah, you and God are becoming one. Since this is what was the Hashem's desire and wisdom, that if so-and-so says this and so-and-so says that, Reuben says X and Shimon says Y, the verdict will be Z. When you learn and you internalize and you understand this verdict as an actual halacha, Mishnah Gemara Poskim, which is set in the Mishnah Gemara or the poskim, whatever the word poskim. The bottom line in halacha, if you're grasping and understanding and encompassing the sichloi in your intellect, the desire and the will and the intellect shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Hashem. No thought is ever able to grasp him, not his will and not his intellect. And the only way to grasp him is when they enclose themselves, when you learn the halacha, which is in front of you. And that means, in a certain sense, right?
So a girl who doesn't learn Gemara doesn't get this?
If you know what?
A girl who doesn't learn Gemara, that just learns the bottom line, it's not, we don't get this?
Why that's only a girl? I'll ask you a different question. What about a guy who didn't learn Gan
That's what
Shas?
she was saying.
Oh, you asked that?
I'm speaking, yeah. What happens is, understanding.
Yeah. So let me just, I'll tell you how the Alter Rebbe explains it elsewhere. What he says is, he says as follows, that when the neshama arrives in the next world, in Gan Eden, Ashrei mi shebo lechan v'talmuda b'yoda, it says. Fortunate is someone who comes here to Gan Eden with his learning in his hand. Why? Because in this world, at the end of the day, you don't really understand the nimshal. You don't really understand the analogy. You only get, right? You only get the concept. It's very hard to discover the actual godliness. So you have it, but you don't know what you have. In the next world, you get to discover what you actually have. Yeah? So he says, how does it make sense that some people have a mitzvah to learn? I mean, how much Torah should you learn? The answer is, if you stop and you waste 1 minute of Torah for a guy, what's the din? Chayav what? Chorus, yeah. That's, by the way, one of the, step one, where a guy says, I'm out. If you do not, I did nothing wrong. That's the problem. You're supposed to be learning Torah every moment, right? You didn't learn Torah, you're out. Strike against you. Every moment you didn't learn, you get chorus. So he says, it's not possible. I'm done. And what's interesting is, yeah, but if there's a mitzvah nobody else can do, like you making a living, then you have to go do that mitzvah. So it doesn't make sense. That means you'll end up having one guy who has the talent and capacity and God-given time to be able to learn all day and all night long. and he has to finish Gan Shas. Another guy, for him it's sufficient to learn one little chapter in the morning, one chapter in the evening. It's good enough. In other words, the mitzvah is a gray area, how much you're meant to learn. The reason is very simple why. Every soul has a different mission in this world. How do you know your mission? You look in the Shulchan Aruch and you say, how much time do I have to learn? And you look at yourself, how much talent do I have to learn? What is my capacity? How much am I able to do? And the point is, you exert yourself to the nth degree in the capacity that you have. And when you do, you and God fuse in the way that's meant for your soul. So if you have talent and capacity and ability to learn all day and all night and to learn Gan Shas, go for it. That's what you need to do. If you don't, and it's very easy to discern. That's what? Yeah, some people do. Most people.
He didn't do anything else besides.
Right.
Because he was.
Most people have a little bit of a challenge doing that.
Yeah.
So he needs to achieve that. If he wastes one moment of his time, what's going to happen? Get this straight. God doesn't punish anyone. No punishment. What he says to you is, if your soul wants to experience its full connection, you have to truly utilize every fiber of your being. And then you get to the goal you're meant to get to. So if you're a girl, you don't have this mitzvah, because Hashem didn't give it to you. But what did he give you? So should you learn Torah? Of course, you're learning Torah right now. When you're learning Torah right now, Torah that women are meant to learn, that's what your soul is meant to be accomplishing. Because for your soul, that's the goal. So every soul has its mission and what it wants to accomplish. But get back to the central point. The central point here is that the Torah that you learn is divine energy. So why should you learn Gemara, which apparently seems to be irrelevant? It's not irrelevant. It's God being integrated into you through meiosis. You and God are becoming one. And why is the Gemara so meandering and unclear? Because it's God penetrating you. It's God's intellect. We're not learning here in order to know how to keep Shabbos, even though we might be learning Gemara Shabbos. We're learning about what God thinks about this situation. So it's almost like, today there's like this point to make Chabad house in every part of the world. Right? Yeah. The Rebbe wanted to be every place in the world. There shouldn't be a place where there's no ability to have Judaism. In the days of the Gemara, they were doing the same thing in a slightly different way. They weren't traveling physically into the whole world. What they did was, they traveled in their minds to every single possibility of whatever may possibly happen. And they were unbelievable at it. They literally thought up every concoction of any possibility of what maybe, who knows, and then what? And they wanted to know in every single situation, what does God think about that? That's what they did. Why? Because once you understand the intellect of God with the principles, right? That, like Rabbi Shmuel says, the 13 principles of how you learn and extrapolate Gemara. So once you get the general ideas, you and God are becoming one. And Jews throughout the ages have sat and studied and learned and pored over Gemara and Chumash and Tanakh and Halacha and everything. And why are we doing it? Why am I learning the story of Achashverosh and Vashti? And it's like, seriously, what on earth? What do I care? Some king and I got to read about it, because that story of Achashverosh and Vashti is in Torah. And so when you learn it, it's not about Achashverosh and Vashti, it's about God and you becoming one.
So you don't have to try to get any lesson or point or anything out of it?
So it's not about the lesson that comes out, because that's why, parents at the Shabbos table.
Yeah, but that's how you're kind of it.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but parents at the Shabbos table, they're like, no, Yingale Zogib Savort. And the guy, what?
The kid repeats a vart and he's not what he's saying.
But I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about the kid tells you, I don't know. And you say to him, but what am I paying tuition for? And he says, I have no vart. And you want him to say the vart on the parsha, he doesn't know what to say. So you want me to chazal the Gemara that I learned? I'll tell you that, but what's it going to do with this? The way we teach, sometimes, has very little actual relevance. What we're doing is fusing with the divine. So it's important to learn the lesson. Of course it's important to learn the lesson. That's important to know what it is. But don't underestimate the power of the intellectual process that goes into, even if I don't have a Dvar Torah to tell you at the end.
Process, we're not understanding what you're learning.
If you learn and don't understand,
Correct.
you're just job well done. I mean, many people do
No,
that.
because there's no kinda then.
In
Like,
Torah,
that's
one
the
second.
You're putting yourself
In the
through
written
something
Torah, in
like
Torah-
into you.
your brain
In
is
Torah
not-
Shebechsav, in the written Torah, there's a point to just listen and read, even if you don't understand. That's what the Tehillim you just say.
There's math in the first.
But in Torah Shebal Peh, in the oral Torah, it's true. You have to actually understand. If you didn't understand, you didn't do much. Correct?
Yeah, because you're
That's a
not kinda
contradiction.
What?
That's a contradiction.
Why is it a contradiction? You have to learn and understand. It's important to know what you're talking about.
Otherwise, how does it integrate?
Why is it a contradiction? That's exactly the integration, yeah.
Like a-
That's a different question. Why is the Shiva says only in Gemara?
Are you not allowed to learn practically, like shchita or?
One second. I think in let's just put this on in chinuch, in an educational system. I think it's a big issue if you're learning only Gemara. Big problem, because first of all, you're not really learning Gemara. Even in Gemara itself, you're building. Gemara is basically built on Tanakh, right? The foundation of Gemara is Tanakh, and then Tanakh has Mishnayos on it, and then Mishnayos have Gemara on it. And what we do is
Go straight to the Gemara.
straight to the Gemara. When the kid's like a little kid, he doesn't even know Tanakh yet. Doesn't know anything about Tanakh. Doesn't even know that it exists.
Your 16-year-old doesn't know Chumash. I mean, mine doesn't. At least yours probably does, but mine doesn't. They don't know what Parsha, nothing.
Right,
Seriously.
and that's a problem, right? Because it's like
Chumash Nasha. Learn about Chumash Nasha.
there's a foundation, right? So that's why we do chitas. So it's important to do.
Right, but you just
Every
said-
bacher does chitas. Chitas is every day chumash and Rashi. Chumash Til and Tanya. Chumash Til and Tanya. The standards by Yasna we do. Everyone will do chitas.
The ladies also do.
Yes, no such thing as without it. Correct. And then they do right. No such thing as going to bed without your chitas. And then my kids have a pillow that says, "Don't you dare put your head on me before you did Rambam." Rambam is a daily Rambam of every day. What that does to you, Rambam is when you start learning it, you're happy. Like he lays down, you get an understanding of the whole Torah. And yeah, it's important to go through Tanakh and to learn Tanakh thoroughly and know it. It's also much more interesting
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And you said that the
and
that we
exciting.
Have, thousands of
And-
Bochadim who are not doing that.
And you need to learn Hasidus. If you don't learn Hasidus, then you are really you don't get. If you don't understand this part about why you're learning Gemara, then the Gemara that you're learning is just an intellectual exercise and nothing to do with God.
don't
and no
you
connection.
It does. If you understand the Gemara, you're still connected.
No. But Gemara, you have to do it. You have to have an element of lishma, and yes, so it's like, look at this line over here. V'gam sichloi melubash bohem, v'hu yichud nifla. It's a unity, which is a wondrous unity, when you and the intellect become one. She'ein yichud kamoyo. There's no unity like this. V'loi ke'erkoi nimtza klal begashmius. It doesn't exist in the physical world. Liyos le'achodim, to become absolutely one. Umeyuchodim mamish, completely united. Mikol tzad upino. From every single angle and every nook and cranny and every single possibility, you and the Seichel, and therefore God, which is in the Seichel, become absolutely one. Now, we'll talk about it later on more in the parent, but imagine you could do this with, so when you do it with Gemara, when you do this with Limud HaChasidus, right, you see what we're learning about, this is Chasidus. When you do it with Chasidus, it's almost like you and God are becoming one in a very real way. You're not learning about Hashem. It is Hashem. And what happens is, we are very physical beings. And we're very arrogant, meaning we're very into our own self. And it's very difficult for us to escape our own self. It's called, the Zohar calls it a mashcha dechivya. We live in a serpent's skin. Mashcha is Memshin Chof Aleph, the chivya of the serpent. Ches Vav Yud Aleph. Mashcha is the chivya, is the serpent skin.
Mashcha is the destruction.
Mashcha is the skin, the hide. So a
Skin of a snake.
skin of a snake. We live in the skin of a snake. You ever notice the skin of a snake by you? When you're just like, sometimes you're like, you have these negative feelings and emotions and you're trying to, what?
We should try to shed it.
Yeah. And you almost like inside, you're so good inside, but the exterior just is crass and ugly and disgusting. And what we want to do is internalize Hashem into us. When you learn Pnimiyus HaTorah, especially Pnimiyus HaTorah, the Pnimiyus of Hashem enters into you. Every single Vart in Torah that you learn is godly. You learn Gemara, Hashem's penetrating you. But if you learn Pnimiyus HaTorah, what happens is He penetrates you in a revealed way. And you literally feel it. You and God become one. It's a wondrous, incredible, powerful experience of oneness that we get with Hashem. And so, yes, I think it's a big problem. I think if you learn just Gemara, you're bound to get, at the end of the day, you'll get Apikoursim. That's how
That
it
makes
is.
sense why someone who is supposedly a big Talmid Chacham could do such disgusting things.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that level of that. I'm talking about just regular. Ask any bacher that you know who learns only Gemara. Ask him if you believe in Hashem. Ask that question.
So you're saying that thousands and thousands of Hasidic Bacharim are
Missing
in
something.
trouble?
I'm not saying anything.
You just did that.
What?
You just did that.
I'm saying, why don't you ask them a question? Ask them, turn to them with a question and say, do you believe in Hashem? And don't just say, do you believe in Hashem in a very superficial way. Ask deep. Do you actually feel God in your life? Talk to them about Hashem.
Sure.
And very quickly you'll discover
It's a
that,
non-discussion.
The girls
correct.
in our
You know how to
girls'
keep
school-
Shabbos, but I don't know about God.
So in our girls'
I know why I
school,
keep
we have
Shabbos.
discussions.
Yeah, girls do it much more. Yes.
Probably
But
plenty of girls don't know what believing in Hashem means as well, unfortunately.
They should have gone from zealous.
I think a lot of,
That's very true.
yeah, there's a system that trains in really wonderful things. Tznius is amazing. It's special. And sometimes, and just certain midos, like emotions and the way we, character traits are so fine and so refined and so
But
beautiful.
Tanya will get that, right?
No, you can get them much more in many other places also.
Where?
It's not.
Wow.
I think you find a lot of very refined people who didn't learn Tanya at all. Very refined and very modest and very tznius and very frum. But not very godly.
Yeah, it's very. It's
There's
very
almost like-
external. It's chitzonius.
Exactly.
Like,
There's
chitzonius
no
is-
connection to Hashem Yisbarach.
So that's
And
it.
Pnim is what you know.
It's
Pnim is
a
they give you
nice,
that.
soft soul.
Right, a nice, soft, beautiful
so let's
person.
Say, for example, my cousin that it's not recorded, right? My cousin